Welcome to Telling Their Stories with Audrey B., where we cover child abuse, true crime, awareness, and much more. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. The sources for this video are the Daily Gazette out of New York, Minding Hearts, which is an awareness group regarding child abuse and child placing agencies, and MSN. I do want to provide a trigger warning, as this video will contain content that is disturbing, and it may be triggering for some viewers. This content is extremely disturbing, and so I want to make sure that everyone who is listening or watching is aware of what will be contained in this video. There is child abuse, descriptive child abuse, that is very hard to listen to, but it's important that we are aware of these things. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to be talking today about Charlie Garay. This article states, Rotterdam man convicted of murder in foster child's death. A Rotterdam foster father murdered 4-year-old foster child Charlie Garay in December 2020. A Schenectady County Court jury found Monday. So he was found guilty on Monday of murdering Charlie Garay. The jury deliberated for about 6 hours over 2 days before convicting 28-year-old Daquan Green of second-degree murder in Garay's death. Green now faces up to 25 years to life in prison at his December sentencing, a maximum prosecutors will push for, Prosecutor Christina Tremonte Pelham said Monday. Without question, based on what he was convicted of doing, that's the sentence he deserves, Tremonte Pelham said. Green was accused of killing Garay on December 20, 2020 by stepping on his chest, causing massive internal injuries. Prosecutors argued that Green's actions severely lacerated the boy's liver and caused other internal injuries that would have killed him within minutes, and then fabricated a story about why the boy stopped breathing while first responders worked to save his life. Garay and his older brother, who was 5 at the time of the incident, were placed in the care of Green and his wife, Latricia, in September 2020, after being removed from the home of their biological parents by Child Protective Services in Albany County. The couple, who cared for 3 children of their own at the time, were certified foster parents. In opening statements, Tremonte Pelham said the foster home was meant to be a safe haven for the children, but said Green abused the boys and eventually killed the youngest brother. Green's attorney, James Tyner, argued his client was not responsible for Garay's death, that Green attempted to save the child's life using CPR and showed great concern about the child's condition while first responders attempted to save his life. Actions, he said, were not indicative of a murderer. He added that the foster brothers had suffered abuse prior to being placed in the Green's care, and as a result were difficult to deal with at times, which necessitated discipline in order to ensure their, quote, proper upbringing. And this is a picture of Daquan Green, the foster dad, and this is the home the children lived in with their foster parents in Rotterdam. This is the home where Charlie Garay was murdered. A lawsuit filed in the state Supreme Court in Albany County says that, quote, the agencies ignored repeated red flags and bypassed established procedures, leaving Charlie in the care of a home at the home of Daquan and Latricia Green for months longer than they should have been there, and even bypassed procedures to initially place him there. Charlie and his 5-year-old sibling were removed from their biological parents and placed in the Schenectady County foster home by Albany County Department of Social Services in September of 2020, where they were ignored and abused until Charlie was dead. Lorraine Silverman is the attorney bringing the lawsuit. The lawsuit names multiple employees in both counties, including caseworkers, supervisors, and a CPS intake specialist, employees from the St. Anne Institute, a counselor, a case manager, and a social worker. The allegations include: employees did not interview and assess the two children's needs. Officials knew that Latricia Green was running an unlicensed daycare out of her home. Latricia hurt children and placed them in a dog crate as punishment. The state did not follow procedures and policies to certify the Greens as a foster placement, nor did they ever check on the children in the home. The state failed to respond to multiple calls that would have prevented Charlie from being killed. The foster parent certification process was never properly completed, even though Daquan Green acknowledged fasting as a self-care practice and stated that he had a short temper, and both Latricia and Daquan Green indicated that their parenting styles were authoritative. The state, quote, failed to warn the foster parents that Charlie was on complex medications and that he suffered from complex issues, even though the Greens said they did not want children with issues several times. The Greens were never trained to manage, care for, and parent foster children who had the medical and other conditions like Charlie had. The weekend the children were supposed to be in the foster placement turned into 3 agonizing months for the children. Albany County called for an extension, saying that the Greens wanted to keep the children in the home. This was untrue. The children missed appointments. Quote, from the start of the foster care placement, the defendants did not make the required visits, assessments, evaluations, referrals, and checks to determine if they were properly and safely placed in the Green foster home. In October, Latricia Green reported a behavioral issue, but no one from the state would talk to her about it. Latricia Green asked that the children be removed for a variety of reasons. One reason included that she did not have sleeping accommodations for the children. Rather than remove the children, Albany County asked Schenectady County whether one of the children could sleep in a walk-in closet. Albany County also recommended placing the other child in the basement. Schenectady County employee indicated that Charlie could not sleep there, and Albany County lied, saying that they would remove the children the next day. They never showed up. After missing several appointments and using COVID as a reason for not having the children in school, on December 6, Latricia Green indicated the children were sick with the flu and she could not allow, quote, in-person visits, but the counties did not require any documentation. They didn't require anything to prove what she said. 4 days before Charlie was murdered, Albany County caseworkers showed up at the home to drop off a door alarm for a bedroom of one of the children. The children were beaten with sticks or switches, hands struck with pots and pans, made to do wall sits, force-fed, had their mouths filled with food as punishment, food withheld, hit in their stomachs with jugs, sprayed with cold water, forced to take cold showers, pushed down, choked, confined to a dog cage as punishment, and denied medical care and schooling. The lawsuit also alleges that Daquan Green stomped on them. The surviving child suffered a torn frenulum, swollen lip, bruising to the torso and face, ear bruising and scarring to the neck, and bruising to the pelvis, among other injuries. Quote, I really can't really talk too much about the lawsuit because it's litigation, but it breaks my heart to have to put any kid in foster care, said Albany County Executive Dan McCoy. We try to do everything in our power to protect these children. It's so preliminary and it's being handled in court, so I don't want to say one way or another, but if there is an issue, we're going to take ownership and make sure this doesn't happen. As far as I know, everything was followed. The T's were crossed, the I's were dotted, said McCoy. St. Anne Institute have not returned request for comment. Guys, this story is absolutely horrendous. So the information that I've included comes from news articles, and then the information regarding the lawsuit came from Minding Hearts, which is the awareness group that advocate for children and for change in child placing agencies and state agencies such as Child Protective Services. So essentially what has happened here is these children were removed from their parents. It doesn't give the reason, but they were removed in Albany County, New York. And I'm assuming, based on the information, that Albany County did not have foster placement for them. They didn't have a place to put them. So they asked Schenectady County if they would place them. But it was only supposed to be for a short period of time, like a weekend, that they were supposed to be in the Greens' home. But that weekend turned into months. Even though the foster parents, Latricia Green, had stated that there were behavior issues and she had asked for the boys to be removed, but yet no one was doing anything. And that's not an excuse for Latricia Green or Daquan Green for what they did. But it just goes to show how broken our system is. The article states that in the lawsuit, it is alleged that these foster parents were not equipped. They did not have the proper training. They had stated that they did not want children with special needs or medical issues placed in their home. And when the boys were placed in their home, it's alleged that they were not told about their issues. They were not trained on how to handle such issues. They placed these boys in a home with foster parents who stated that their discipline practice was authoritative. Now, I can tell you that there should be no foster home with that discipline technique. I mean, there are times, yes, that you have to be firm, but you're firm, fair, and consistent. You're not authoritative. You're not going to get anywhere with children who are so traumatized if you use that type of discipline. These children were beaten, allegedly. They were placed in a dog cage, allegedly. They were stomped on. I mean, they were tortured, basically. I mean, this lawsuit alleges that they were tortured. And obviously, there's some merit to those allegations because Daquan Green was just found guilty of murder of Charlie Garay on Monday. So there was enough evidence to prove that. And so now we have a lawsuit against caseworkers, social workers, counselors, so many people that were involved in these children's lives and in placing them into this home, in a home that they should have never been in a home that, in my opinion, excuse me, in my opinion, should never be a foster home to begin with, which is quite obvious now with what has happened. But there were so many red flags that should have been noticed. And in my opinion, I think they were noticed. But I think that this system is so broken and lacks so many good homes, and they don't have places to put these children. So they will remove them from their home, and then it's like, what are we going to do with them? And, you know, they're not going to go home with a caseworker, and a caseworker may spend one night in an office with children, but by that next day, you better bet they're going to find a place to put these kids, because they're not going to want to have to spend another night in the office with the children. And I'm not blaming that on caseworkers. A caseworker should never have to spend all night in an office with a child. But that tells you the desperation and why children end up in placements that they should never be in. These boys should have never, ever been placed in this home. And this home should have never been a foster care placement at all for any children, whether they had special needs, medical issues, behavior issues, or were just the most perfect, well-behaved children. This home, apparently, just by looking at what has happened, should have never had children placed there. So this is a case that is not only horrendous because of what happened to Charlie and his brother. I mean, his brother suffered serious injuries as well. He was fortunate, though, to still have his life and be able to leave that foster home, where Charlie left that foster home in a manner that is unfathomable. So, you know, it's about what happened to Charlie and the horrendous abuse and all of that, but this is also about how broken our system is, how there needs to be change. I see no mention whatsoever in any of the articles that I've read, any research that I've done, that there was ever a guardian ad litem over these children. I didn't see that. I would think that if there was one, that person would be listed in the lawsuit as well, because obviously they wouldn't have done their job if they didn't advocate that. First of all, the children shouldn't have been placed there. Second of all, when issues started arising, that they got them out of there. I mean, when a foster parent tells you come and remove these children, that means you better go and remove those children. And they didn't do that. They said they were coming the next day, and they never showed up. So there are just so many things that went wrong in this situation. And if this can happen to Charlie, this can happen to another child. And that is why it is so important that we continue to use our voice to speak for these children, to use our voice to get our systems changed. These child placing agencies that are broken, understaffed, underpaid, that something is done about that. Because the missing and the murdered cannot cry out for justice, it is the duty of the living to do that for them, and that's what we need to be doing. And we need to be using our voices so that we don't ever get to the place of having the missing and murdered. Because no child ever placed in a foster care system that is meant to keep them safe, protect them, nurture them, love them, care for them, because apparently their home environment could not do that. So we put them in a system that is supposed to do that, and they end up being murdered. And that is not okay. So I appreciate you guys listening to Charlie's story and his brother's story. And I encourage you to please use your voice and to speak out and advocate for change within your local child placing agencies, whether they're state agencies or private child placing agencies. Use your voice to advocate. Look into these places. Read the reports. There are reports that come out about if they're following their policies and procedures. I mean, they are required to have reports. You can get those reports and you can read them and you can see where they're at in their compliance. And we all need to do that, because if we don't, we're going to continue to have more Charlies. So I appreciate you listening to Telling Their Stories with Audrey B., where we cover child abuse, true crime, awareness, and much more. And I hope you guys have a great day.